Welcome back. You're watching WION The World with me, Raisha Sehgal, and I'm also being joined by CM Vasudev, former Finance Secretary, here in the studio with us. Thank you so much for being here with us today, sir. Just for better understanding, in just a short while from now, the budget will be announced by the Indian Finance Minister. What are people of India essentially looking for at the upcoming budget?
Well, I don't know what the people generally are looking for, but I can say that a large number of people must be wanting to see how the government's reaction is to the political implications of the election in which the performance of the government was less than as expected. Will it affect the fiscal or the budgetary policies? After all, ultimately politics does drive economics. So how the government is going to do it, whether it is going to balance a little bit of populism with fiscal prudence, or whether it will stay the course as has been the practice in the last 4 or 5 budget of investment in infrastructure, fiscal prudence and public investment focus. That has been the focus in the last few budgets. Whether there is a change in that, we have to see that.
Also, what measures are expected to boost consumer spending, which has been one of the critical issues in the lead up to the
suppose consumer
budget?
spending, I think, has to basically come from the rural areas. So I think a lot of incentives for improving the situation in the rural and agri area, which have been suffering from a lot of distress in the last few years, which contributed to the election results also. I would see a lot of focus in the budget on improving the situation in the rural areas, which will provide a lot of consumer boost also if the economy in the rural area gets better.
So before the union budget, the economic survey was laid out yesterday, which clearly emphasized that employment generations is the real bottom line for the private sector. Do you feel that the entire pressure right now is on the private sector?
Well, not really. You know, ultimately you can say employment is a consequence of growth. You cannot just say that you have employment without growth. So if there are measures and policies which will improve the growth prospects, which will improve the growth in the private sector, jobs will follow. Of course, government will have to focus a little bit more on labor-intensive sectors, give some incentives in that area, incentives to private sector in those areas, incentive to the MSME sector, which will create more jobs.
Just to follow up on that, sir, the economic survey asked the private sector to perhaps create approximately 8 million jobs annually until 2036. How do you reckon the budget will be able to tackle that? Your assessment of that?
I don't know. I don't think your government can ask the private sector to create jobs. Government can provide incentives to sectors which are labor intensive, and private sector can respond to those incentives. And if growth in those sectors picks up, then jobs will automatically be created. What the numbers will be, very difficult to say.
Right, and stay with us, sir. These are live visuals from the Parliament, where the Speaker is addressing the Parliament. In just a short while from now, India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be laying out the union budget for this year. Well, the key expectations from Budget 2024 is that it will continue with a record capital expenditure allocation with emphasis to the infrastructure sector. All eyes are now on the Modi 3.0 government to provide income tax relief to the common man and also drive economic growth while maintaining fiscal deficit target. And the live visuals from the Indian Parliament, where in just a short while from now, India's Finance Minister will be laying out the budget. This is the first budget under Modi 3.0 government, and all eyes will be on the Modi 3.0 government to provide income tax relief to the common man and also drive economic growth while maintaining fiscal deficit. Well, the key expectations from Budget 2024 is that it will continue with a record capital expenditure allocation with emphasis to the infrastructure growth. India's individual taxpayers are also eagerly awaiting potential relief measures, with the interim budget of 2024 offering little in terms of tax benefits. Right. So thank you for staying with us. Now, the economic survey that we were talking about earlier, that also signals in food prices out of retail inflation while deciding the interest rates. Your assessment of that?
Well, that will be a very difficult one, because ultimately, food prices do affect a lot of other things, even in the manufacturing side, in the transportation side and all that. You cannot, I suppose it may not be very practical to take out the food inflation from the basket of inflation targeting which the RBI is mandated to do. So I find that it will be very difficult to implement that particular suggestion.
And we are shifting our focus to the Indian Parliament, where India's Finance Minister is about to present the Union Budget 2024, the first under Modi 3.0 government. Take a listen.
Have reposed their faith in the government led by Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and re-elected it for a historic third term under his leadership. We are grateful for their support, faith, and trust in our policies. We are determined to ensure that all Indians, regardless of religion, caste, gender, and age, make substantial progress in realizing their life goals and aspirations. Global context. The global economy, while performing better than expected, is still in the grip of policy uncertainties. Elevated asset prices, political uncertainties, and shipping disruptions continue to pose significant downside risks for growth and upside risks to inflation. In this context, India's economic growth continues to be the shining exception and will remain so in the years ahead. India's inflation continues to be low, stable, and moving towards the 4% target. Core inflation, that is non-food and non-fuel, currently is 3.1%. Steps are being taken to ensure supplies of perishable goods reach markets adequately. Interim budget. As mentioned in the interim budget, we need to focus on 4 major castes, namely the Garib, Mahilaye, Yuva, and Annadata, the poor, women, youth, and the farmer. For Annadata, we announced higher minimum support prices a month ago for all major crops, delivering on the promise of at least a 50% margin over costs. Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana was extended for 5 years, benefiting more than 80 crore people. Administrative actions for approval and implementation of various schemes announced in the interim budget are well underway. The required allocations have been made. Budget theme. Turning attention to the full year and beyond in this budget, we particularly focus on employment, skilling, MSMEs, and the middle class. I am happy to announce the Prime Minister's package of 5 schemes and initiatives to facilitate employment, skilling, and other opportunities for 4.1 crore youth over a 5-year period, with a central outlay of 2 lakh crore rupees. I will speak about them shortly, while more details may be seen in the annexure. This year, I've made a provision of 1.48 lakh rupees, 1.48 lakh crore rupees for education, employment, and skilling. Budget priorities. The people have given a unique opportunity to our government to take the country on the path of strong development and an all-round prosperity. In the interim budget, we promise to present a detailed roadmap for our pursuit of Vikasit Bharat. In line with the strategy set out in the interim budget, this budget envisages sustained efforts on the following 9 priorities for generating ample opportunities for all. Number 1, productivity and resilience in agriculture. Number 2, employment and skilling. Number 3, inclusive human resource development and social justice. 4, manufacturing and services. 5, urban development. 6, energy security. 7, infrastructure. 8, innovation, research and development. And 9, next generation reforms. Subsequent budgets will build on these and add more priorities and actions. A more detailed formulation will be carried out as part of the economic policy framework about which I will speak later in this speech. This budget details some of the specific actions to be initiated in the current year towards fulfillment of these priorities, with potential for transformative changes. The budget also covers some of the previously made announcements with intent to strengthen them and step up their implementation for expediting our journey towards the goal of Vikasit Bharat. Priority 1, productivity and resilience in agriculture. Transforming agricultural research. Our government will undertake a comprehensive review of the agricultural research setup to bring the focus on raising productivity and developing climate-resilient varieties. Funding will be provided in challenge mode, including to the private sector. Domain experts, both from the government and outside, will oversee the conduct of such research. Release of new varieties. New 109 high-yielding and climate-resilient varieties of 32 field and horticultural crops will be released for cultivation by farmers. Natural farming. In the next 2 years, 1 crore farmers across the country will be initiated into natural farming, supported by certification and branding. Implementation will be through scientific institutions and willing gram panchayats. 10,000 need-based bio-input resource centers will be established. Missions for pulses and oil seeds. For achieving self-sufficiency in pulses and oil seeds, we will strengthen their production, storage and marketing. As announced in the interim budget, a strategy is being put in place to achieve Atmanirbharta for oil seeds such as mustard, groundnut, sesame, soybean and sunflower. Vegetable production and supply chains. Large-scale clusters for vegetable production will be developed closer to major consumption centers. We will promote farmer-producer organizations, cooperatives, and startups for vegetable supply chains, including for collection and storage and marketing.